And I asked Brad to just talk a little bit about how Colorado River, a little bit about Northern water and how Colorado River is important to Northern. Brad, thank you for being here. Oops, sorry, I could get it over.
Arrow key.
Good afternoon. Always technology. Thank you for the invitation.
And you're going to have to stay at the podium.
That's going to be problematic. It's a pleasure to be here representing Northern Water and alum of CSU 3 times over. Enjoyed my time here many years ago. Spent the time here, then went on to grad school at Davis, California. So all that together and 30 years of working at Northern Water now. Can't believe that. I learn something new every day. The world's changing. We're seeing conditions that hydrologically that we never would have envisioned. Even when the 07 guidelines were put in place in terms of a standing operational agreement between the upper and lower basin, we had it figured out. I was involved in some of those meetings at the time, doing some modeling scenario. We never thought we should waste our time with scenarios like we're seeing in real time in terms of a stingy Mother Nature, because we just convinced ourselves it'll never happen. So we don't need the guidelines to apply to that. But again, here we are.
Here we are.
And, I thought I would just talk a little bit about Northern Water first, the physics of the plumbing that we enjoy. Some of that plumbing we enjoyed with the Bureau of Reclamation, which is many of you would have an appreciation. Came west, 17 Western states, and built lots of projects to provide irrigation water primarily, but not exclusively, to 17 Western states, and Northern Water was the beneficiary of one of those projects in which we cooperate. They're the owner of most of the project, not all of it, but we cooperate with them. And as we're able to get a graphic up here, I will go into a little bit greater detail.
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
What's the plow on?
Yeah.
I'm going to try this. Well, it'd be easier for you if you had the map. I'm sure.
This is Colorado. When I had the opportunity to visit with a provocative group like you all, it's worth, I think, talking about the biases we all have around lots of things, but certainly water is one of those. If you hear folks profess about water, I would suggest, myself included, not that I have too much to profess, but we have biases, and we should understand when folks talk about water that we all have them. What are my biases? I'm a native of Colorado. Good bias, bad bias, I don't know, but it's probably a bias. I'm a farm kid from Eastern Colorado. Bias, good, bad, could be either way. Used water from the South Platte, of which part of that was called river water. Went to CSU. That gave me some, I think, good biases. Grad school in California, I mentioned that biased me. And working in Northern Water biases me. So some of the things I say, and perhaps the way I think, is biased by that. And I would encourage you, if there's something I say that's offensive, I don't intend to do that, but if you think it might be, please, let's stop and let's talk through it. And some of my thoughts around a subject might be based on just that bias unto itself. So
sorry to interrupt here, but on Zoom, we only have the presenter view.
I won't touch anything.
How does? Yeah. Switch. Display. Swap. One of these are gonna have to,
So then go back to Zoom.
right here.
You're in Zoom.
Right, well, this is a little small then. So. Yeah.
So,
Oh, we got-
Katie,
oh, we got going
Can
on.
you, Kaylin, can you see that now?
Yeah, it's in regular view for us. Yep,
Okay,
that looks good.
Okay. I think you all get the shorter end of the deal here, but we'll accommodate the folks far, far and away. Can you hear me okay out there?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, let's, so we're gonna stop at, we have a hard stop. Gonna,
hard stop, 450.
okay.
You can get the 5 extra.
Gonna press on just a little bit about, again, I'd like to talk about a little bit about Northern Water, why we came into existence, how that might relate to you and your drinking water. If you happen to be in the farm business, maybe some Colorado Big Thompson water for farm irrigation, certainly landscape irrigation as well. And talk about the CBT project, which I mentioned. That's really how Northern Water came into existence. Again, like many projects or opportunities to build water supply projects in the West. Northern Water was one of those, and we had an opportunity to partner with Reclamation. And then I'm going to move into the Windy Gap project, kind of to round out how physically Northern Water is connected to the Colorado River. And then we can talk about how to solve the problem in front of us in 5 short minutes, and we'll be done. So Northern Water, we're a Conservancy district. We're the first Conservancy district created in Colorado, really to build with the Reclamation, Bureau Reclamation, the Colorado Big Thompson project. So some view it as the most complicated project that Reclamation ever put together, certainly not the largest. And there's other complicated projects, so I'm not even sure it really holds that award or not, but it is fairly complex. Again, Northern Water was created to pay the freight, both in terms of the capital cost of the project and then ongoing operation and maintenance cost. Our district spans from, in essence, the city and county of Broomfield on the north tier of the metro area, northward along the Front Range to north of Wellington. So about 30-ish miles north of here, 20 miles north of here, and then really tapers down to the South Platte watershed, the irrigated acres along the South Platte all the way to Nebraska. So that's our district, and that district, in terms of its benefit from Colorado River, can receive, and this is important, either first or successive uses of Colorado River supplies. So as it comes over the mountain, we have allottees, as we call them. Those are individuals or communities, cities, special districts, Mr. and Mrs. Farmer Smith that can own a contract for Colorado Big Thompson Water, and they receive their first use of the project water as we release it from the terminal reservoirs. And from that point, there's some left over, right? We all can appreciate that in most uses, there's return flows. It's not all consumptively used. And what doesn't get consumptively used, by and large, runs off fields, runs into the aquifer. Our aquifers are typically tributary to the South Platte, or it goes to wastewater treatment plants. And those plants deliver back to the streams, and it's headed east. And from there, it's captured by other downstream diverters. And that happens again and again, 4 or 5 times as it finds its way to the border of Nebraska. Before I talk about the end game in quite so much detail, let me step back a little bit in terms of how does the project get water from the Colorado River? So I pointed out our district is on the right side of the Continental Divide. That's where the beneficial use occurs. But the water supply comes from the Colorado River, most of it. Little factoid that some folks don't represent, about 5 to 7% of the CBT project's yield actually comes from the east slope. Northern Water has some water rights on the Big Thompson River. They don't come into priority each and every year, but they do yield about 7 to 9,000 acre feet average over the years. So that's east slope water. However, by and large, the bulk of it comes from Grand County, high in the headwaters of the Colorado River, in the Three Lakes area. Some folks refer to it as which consists of Grand Lake. That's the middle circle there, Grand Lake, Shadow Mountain, and Granby Reservoir is the big storing vessel for CBT supplies. There's a watershed off to the west from there, about 5 miles, called the Willow Creek watershed. Provides about 20 to 30,000 acre feet per year, and that water is pumped into Granby. And that unto itself is the collection facilities and region for the Colorado Big Thompson project and Colorado Big Thompson water. It primarily comes off of Rocky Mountain National Park as a snow melt. So during the months of May, June, first parts of July, snow is melting. It's coming into that collection facility. Those reservoirs rise, store that water. And in subsequent months, the balance of the water year and into the following winter, that water is repositioned into where? Your backyard. Horsetooth Reservoir is filled back up. If you notice, if you've been here for a few years, it goes down in the summer months. We have high demand. And it comes back up in the winter months and tops off sometime in the middle parts of April. Same way with Carter Lake. So those two vessels are terminal reservoirs, and it's from those locations that Northern Water gets calls, gets emails, not texts, not tweets, but emails or calls and says, hey, I need some water tomorrow, or this is my demand next week. Will you release from those facilities that water supply for lots of purposes? Irrigation, municipalities, power production, and we make those releases accordingly. As I mentioned earlier, that's released to the first use. To our beneficiaries, there's about 1,500 different beneficiaries. We really roll those up into about 50 or 60 delivery points. So you can have a ditch system, for example, or a water treatment plant that has different contractual entities underneath it. And of course, we focused on that delivery point. So in all told, we're really focused on about 60 places to deliver that CBT water from Horsetooth down to Pooter, from Carter Lake, southward toward Boulder Reservoir, into Boulder Creek, the St. Vrain, the Big Thompson, and ultimately we can make deliveries to the main stem of the South Platte. Facts and figures related to the CBT project. We span 6 counties. Our board has an affiliation to those counties. The Front Range counties each have 3 board members. Counties further to the east and the city and county of Broomfield have 1 board member. And interesting history, but the Conservancy Act of Colorado allows for judges, district judges, to appoint those board members. Which leads to a board that tends to be there year over year, multiple terms. And over those years, likely they come with a lot of knowledge about water, but they come and they continue to be on a board for many years. About little over 600,000 of irrigated acres. We don't supply all those irrigated acres. Again, the main mission Northern Water has is providing Colorado River supply to supplement native supplies. It's a little bit different than most reclamation projects which were put in place to break new farm ground from dry land to irrigated. CBT project came into existence to supplement existing supplies and really was motivated because farmers in the area, over the 600,000 irrigated acres, were finding it pretty challenging to finish a crop in August and September. We had native supplies. We had enough gas in the tank to get to the end of July, middle of August, but not quite enough there. So CBT, which brings over about a little over 200,000 acre feet per year on average, was enough to ultimately provide about a quarter of the supply, some years a third of the supply, to the South Platte Basin in northern Colorado to provide that total supply for agriculture. Again, fairly complex system. There's aspects that Northern Water is heavily involved in managing. In terms of our collection system, we have about 23 staff that are housed in Grand County, and they're responsible on behalf of reclamation to collect the supplies. We get them positioned in Lake Granby or Granby Reservoir, and through the course of the year, reclamation gives us a signal in terms of when to bring water through the Adams Tunnel underneath the Continental Divide, bringing water to the east. And that daily operation is really driven not so much from water demand, because remember, we're meeting our water demand by in large part from terminal storage. That daily activity is from hydropower production. And that is the support for hydropower is done exclusively by reclamation staff. If you're in the building, if you're in the switch yard, it's Western Area Power Authority Administration, excuse me. So unique relationship there. And of course, we all benefit, Northern Colorado and the surrounding states, of that clean renewable power that's generated from the project. So how our board allocates water is fairly unique, and I view it as really critical to how we step into discussions around how to manage a Colorado River system that has challenges. And that's by virtue of because it's defined as a supplemental, each and every year our board steps back, typically in the month of April, and evaluates what's the native supply, how much do we have here in the South Platte, which includes the Poudre, the Big Thompson, the St. Vrain, and Boulder Creek. How much is here? That's calculation number one. That's kind of tricky because you're sitting in April, you got a snowpack, it could snow more. We could have 3 windy days and it could all go away, but we do the best we can. How much snow do we have right now? What's it expected to yield into the stream, which is becoming trickier. Even with better tools, it's still tricky. How much soil moisture do we have? Right, that's important to farmers. Have we had good snow and rains through the spring months and winter months? What's local storage? So how good have the native supplies, which again provide 2/3 to 3/4 of our water supply in the South Platte? What does that look like? If you add all that up, which sometimes is a gut check, it's not simple math. What's the gap? How much are we short? And really in all years, but let's just say 1983. Those who remember 1983, it's always considered the wettest of years. In all years, we have a shortfall. And the board's mission is, how do we fill that gap? What's the most appropriate quota to issue? What is a quota? There's 310,000 shares of the project. We call them units, but think of them as shares. So 310,000 folks out there that bought into the project. And for that one share, that one unit, you receive a percentage of an acre foot. So if the quota is 50%, you receive 0.5 acre foot per unit. So kind of a half a yield. And if it's 100%, if the board's really eager to push a lot of water out of the project, the quota is 100%. And then you would receive as an allottee 1 acre foot per acre foot unit. Again, very unique to water management in the West, particularly as related to reclamation projects. So at the end of the day, the board can accelerate water delivery if it's justified, but they can pull back on the reins if, in fact, the region doesn't need it. Much different than how the lower basin divvies up supplies. So over our existence from 1956, we were created in 37. Project took some time to build. We got war, we got depression, we got challenges in the US, but it came online really in large part in 57 and 58, and the board started issuing every year a quota. So you can see over those years, quotas are all over the mark. It's a bit counterintuitive. If we have a dry year in northeastern Colorado, our conditions are dry in the spring, what does the board do? They set a high quota. And the reverse is the same. If it's very wet, not a lot of need for a lot of Colorado Big Thompson projects. So let's just leave it. Let's get our storage full and get by with the native supplies we have. Very unique. So this functionality of CBT, this ability to move it on any given day throughout our district, our service area, we can deliver it one day out of Horsetooth. The very next day, we can change that delivery point to somewhere south or somewhere east, provides a lot of value to that water supply. It's not constrained by typical uses of changing water supplies, often from agriculture to municipal use. Some of you might be aware that's an arduous, uncertain process. It happens every day. It'll continue to happen, but there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of how that happens through our court system. CBT, it's much simpler. You can either transfer it from yourself to another beneficiary in the region annually. That's just kind of a one-year deal. Hey, I got plenty. Call a farmer. Do you need some? Are you willing to pay me? Maybe, maybe not. None of our business. They do their deal and that water gets transferred for 1 year. But you also can acquire it, the underlying contract right for that water. And that's happening every day as well. And you can imagine it's going from agriculture, in which this trend line shows that at the beginning of the creation of Northern Water, the bulk of the water was in fact owned by agriculture. And over the years, not surprising if you see what's going on around us, municipalities are acquiring that water for use within a municipal and to some degree industrial setting as compared to agriculture. Now, when that farmer sells it, does that mean the farm is no longer a farm? No, he or she is just relying, in my view, more heavily on that native supply that they originally had. They don't have that added benefit of leaning on that CBT, say in August or September. So they might change their cropping patterns to accommodate that.
I'm sorry.
Oh, please.
We had a question here from Fort Lewis. Can you give a little bit more information on how the CBT got the rights to pull water from the Colorado River watershed across the divide? That's the question.
Sure can. There's a water right held by the federal government from 1937 that describes that the ability to move it eastward for power production, municipal and irrigation use. So not unlike other water rights obtained within the state, this one happens to be held by the federal government. I should also mention that in combination with pulling water to the east under the Conservancy Act, there's requirements for providing compensatory storage, which can mean a lot of different things, but in order for the privilege to bring that water east, there's agreements in place that would compensate in some way, shape, or form the west slope, in this case, the main stem of the Colorado River. And from those discussions, Green Mountain Reservoir was created and built, and it's located near Kremling, and it really acts as, at least half of it, acts as the way in which CBT project can continue to divert out of priority up high in the watershed. There's replacement pool within Green Mountain to offset that impact, as well as a portion of Green Mountain was for historical and even new uses, some which is above Green Mountain, up the Blue into Summit County, and much of it's downstream, even as far west as Grand Junction. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Back to CBT, a unit, a lot of flexibility. Cut a deal on any given day. Our board gives approval for that transfer. That the ease in which that occurs creates value to those underlying unit holders. And over the course of years, you can see this graph. CBT is a very valuable commodity, price now upwards of $90,000 per acre foot. So that's happening every month. Acquisitions are occurring, and our board is, in most cases, not everyone, approving those transfers. That's project number one, and that's really kind of the mother lode, so to speak, in bringing over 200,000 acre plus. There was a recognition in the 60s, mid 60s, eventually 1967, in which another water right, this one was filed actually by some leadership of the city of Longmont, ultimately transferred to Northern Water. The Conservancy Act allows for Northern Water to create underlying enterprises called subdistricts. Northern Water has a subdistrict. It's called a municipal subdistrict, Northern Water, and it has the water right for the Windy Gap project. And there was a motivation at the time where leaders of growing communities, even in the 60s, thought the CBT project's not going to be enough. If we continue to transfer the CBT, it's going to happen too quickly. It probably was happening at a rate they didn't anticipate. We need to find another supply. And there happened to be recognition that below the collection facility of the CBT project, there's more water to be had, at least at the time. And Windy Gap water right was filed in 1967, which consists of a diversion point, again, downstream of the primary collection facilities of the CBT, down at a place farther west on the Colorado River, but is really fed primarily during the pumping season when that junior water right's in priority from the Fraser River. So just where the Colorado River and the Fraser come together, Fraser, of course, coming through Winter Park, Tabernash, ultimately hits the Colorado River. At that point, there's a small reservoir situated by a dam that's placed across the present time all the Colorado River. And it, in fact, diverts water from a small little, maybe perhaps nondescript pump house pictured here, right off the highway if one drives between Granby and Kremling. And it's, again, 1967 water right. So we talk about the compact date. We talk about juniors and senior juniors and who's going to take the toll when we have a compact call. I might suggest if we get that far, we're fighting about who's going to be in and who's going to be out when a compact call occurs, we have failed. We have failed. We need to solve this problem before we find ourselves figuring out how to administer our water rights in the event of a compact call. I might mention, this has been pointed out in the news a little bit, but Windy Gap, when it was built, let me talk about the plumbing first. So Windy Gap pumps its water from the pump plant. When it's in priority, it could only be 10 days a year. It could be 40 days a year, usually during runoff. When the Fraser River is big, it pumps water up into Granby Reservoir. At that point, in essence, the sub-district, the Windy Gap enterprise, leases space and transmission capacity from the Bureau of Reclamation. From the get-go of Windy Gap, there was recognition someday Windy Gap needs its own storage, because what can happen when you're relying on somebody else's reservoir to store your water? It can be full, no room in the inn. So in that case, Windy Gap's yield is 0. You're in priority, nowhere to store your water, your yield is 0. The other challenge Windy Gap has had is it's also a junior. So 1967 water right might not come into priority. There's bad snowpack at Winter Park ski area. Windy Gap might not come into priority. Gross Reservoir might be filling upstream and it doesn't come into priority. So it doesn't come into priority, 0 yield. If Granby is full, in a wet period, a cycle of wet years, the yield is 0. So there's always been recognition that, in fact, Granby needed its own storage. And as we speak, a year in the making, the sub-district, most of the participants, not all of them, 15 participants are investing in a new reservoir. It's about 5 miles west of Loveland, called Chimney Hall Reservoir. And that's plumbed into the CBT project, and it will bring Windy Gap water over. And instead of relying on the CBT project to store its water, it will have its own designated bucket in Chimney Hollow. And from here, Northern Water and its subdistrict can feed the same demands as it has presently in releasing water from the CBT project. Any questions on that? A little bit of magic? Several.
I'm kind of curious, Brad, how frequently has Granby failed as a vessel for the Windy Gap project? You know, has that happened very often?
50% of the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that justifies the Chimney Hollow then. I mean, you're not,
Yep.
getting the storage you need.
Tom, go ahead.
If you have transmission capability but not storage capability, you can move it through out of tunnel.
That's correct. Do I need to repeat the question?
Yes.
Sorry out there. Thanks for the question, Tom. So the question was, we have transmission capacity that's intact, certainly functioning. It's just the storage capacity that's been nil. In those years in which Windy Gap came into priority, but Granby was full. So there's no use of pumping. You could pump it and it would spill right back out. Yep. So Chimney Hall, this is a rendering.
You might mention the cameras that they can go to on the website.
Yeah,
They go to-
chimneyhollow.org, I think, is the website. You can certainly get there through northernwater.org and go to the Chimney Hollow, or the Windy Gap Firming Project is another name for what ultimately is getting built. So this is a rendering. This is 3 years out yet. We've just passed year 1 of construction. That first year has been going down, down, down to get a good tie into the underlying earth, and starting really in the next few weeks, the dam will start coming up, and it's quite a sight to see. Highest dam to be built in the United States in the last about 30 years. So reservoirs and dams are not something we're in the mood to create in the US anymore. So about 20 years in permitting. So it takes some time to get it right, and we think we've got it right. I will quickly mention in terms of one thing that we got right, among a lot of other things, but you'll hear particularly from West Slope, and I hope Andy Mueller brings this up to next week when he's here, that shows a commitment to, along the way, as we think about finding ways to provide a water supply to a doubling population, struggles with climate change, can we do things better? And that Windy Gap Reservoir that I talked about, which is a dam across the entire Colorado River, there's some who thought, man, Northern, you didn't get that right. And through the conversations of permitting the Windy Gap Firming Project, well, let's talk about how to get it right. And so ultimately we'll come out as part of the mitigation and agreement with Grant County is to shrink the size of Windy Gap Reservoir and recreate the Colorado River next to that reservoir and keep water in that channel all but the days in which Windy Gap is pumping. So it reconnects the upper parts of the Fraser and the Colorado River to the lower parts for obvious ecological reasons. That's about a $28 million project, and we celebrated a month and a half ago or so the construction of that project, which will take about 3 years to build. So, is it? What's that? I said with 5 minutes left, we'd talk about solutions, so I'm spot on. So where do we go from here? There's Colorado River experts well beyond my capacity, so I won't bore you with what little I might know about the ins and outs of the compact. But I just wanted to throw out a few things for you to think about. And I do that best by just throwing out some pictures. You've all seen something like this, I'm going to assume. Y'all realize it's not news to anybody. The Colorado River watershed is not yielding what it once was. Right? So where are we? Are we more recent years at a 10.6 million acre foot inflow, maybe more, heck, maybe less? I prefer not to get caught up in decimal dust. It's just not good. So a few thoughts. Where to go from here? We have got to, and I think it's the collective we've got to engage, support, and guide those who are negotiating on our behalf. These processes take time, but they take folks who ideally are not throwing rocks in front of the process, but are helping our state. What can we live with in our state? Across the entire state, not just what the Northern Water wants and needs. I think we recognize we'd like a little bit less risk in our life. But what's the trade-off? You can eliminate your risk if you don't want any yield. Right? If you don't want anything out of your project, if I say, hey, Northern Water Board, how about 1 acre foot a year? Let's operate there. Risk is zero, but are we really doing our mission? I'm really not up for a lot of risk. I like a little bit of sleep. So does the board. Where do we settle on that? It's kind of a new discussion. We've had a piece of machinery that served us very well, but that will take a lot of hard discussions, both in boardrooms as well as a lot of face time with folks who are key to those decision-making, not just here in Colorado, East and West Slope, but also through the Upper Colorado River Commission, making sure that we're aligned among our colleague states of Wyoming, Utah, and New Mexico. Increase resiliency. One way to do that, I might suggest to the board, is keep the project fuller than emptier. It sounds pretty simple. But again, a reservoir in some definitions provides more if you drain it every year, right? You get a lot of yield, a lot of up and down. It's a machine, it's providing a lot of water, but it might not be very resilient in these times when you don't know when it's going to refill. So kind of simple theme. Hey, board, maybe as you think about setting the quota, getting input from our water users, soil moisture, local storage, snowpack, anticipated runoff from snowpack. Maybe we think more about another element of what's the state of the project. We got about 2.5, 3 years of storage in that project. Let's kind of take a look-see and make sure we feel comfortable that that project can keep churning out at least some water year over year, mostly independent of what Mother Nature might do in terms of her getting even more unruly with less precip. The graphic on the left, and your right, don't look at the words. We have a lot of processes at Northern Water. And I might suggest some of our resiliency can come from internal programs. For example, they're typically voluntary for our water users. Hey, water user, board issued X. If you can't use it all, do you want to carry it into next year? It's a nice tool if you're, at least if you're a municipal water manager. They tend to be pretty conservative in how they manage supplies. Heck yeah, Northern Water, I'll take you up on that. I probably will do some things to not use all of what you allocated, but you're going to allow me to store that in the project, that supply for next year. And next year will come and we'll reevaluate. Maybe I needed to store it for the following year. Maybe, how much is too much? You don't want everybody storing everything or your project gets even fuller and you might spill more. But it's programs like that I think our board will be thinking about to provide our water users more tools to flex with how they manage their native supply, what those native supplies might be, how risky they are, to complement that for our water users. Let's talk about conservation. And I think it falls in the category of resiliency. Are we in Colorado, in the Northern Front Range primarily? I'm an Eastern Colorado guy, right? I don't see anybody when I'm out there. The people live here. Are we willing, think about use at your home, wherever you might be living, an apartment. We use water indoor. The consumptive use is virtually nil. Take a shower, the towel might evaporate, but most of the water I consume in my home goes into the sink, down the drain. It's headed to the wastewater treatment plant. What happens? We find a way to reuse it. That's how water is administrated in the South Platte. So indoor use, 99% of what I use, I'm not suggesting we waste this water, but in fact, it goes back to the stream, it gets used. It's that stinking use outdoor on the new coined word, non-functional turf. I think that was in statute this year. So non-functional turf, that water that goes to that, not surprising, gets evaporated, transpires, poof, it's in the air, it's over the Husker State, right? It's gone. It's gone, and they enjoy the rainfall, and maybe it goes further east, but we don't enjoy it, so it's gone. Are we willing to step back? And we love our lawns. That's on your left. Can we get on board with a landscape that looks like the right? I think we can. It's going to take some time. We found ways to change in America, kind of how the landscape looks. Are we willing to do that in the West? Some communities have done a phenomenal job, Las Vegas being one of them. I'm hoping we can leave a little bit more greenery than what Las Vegas allows, but nonetheless, they've got their challenges, we have ours. I'm going to suggest this is not going to solve our problems, but I think as we put in new developments and even in our existing communities, it's just time to step back and recalculate whether that water we put out onto non-functional turf, which doesn't provide any food or fiber, last time I checked, and think about ways to establish a different kind of a landscape. Kind of an indirect tie. As we think about our state, you have a map on your left. You think about how do people react in the Front Range, not just the Northern Front Range, but if you're Denver Water, if you're Colorado Springs, if you're Pueblo, Aurora, those are the biggies. Probably constitute 4 million people, all told, north to south. What are they going to do when they might have less Colorado River supplies? Oh, they'll conserve. Heck yeah, they will. I know these folks. They're going to do that, just like we're going to do that. But they're going to maybe need other supplies. Look at the map on your left. If you know Colorado at all, you can kind of go around the state, at least in my opinion. You can start in the Northwest. There's been talk over the years about extracting water from the Yampa Basin. Not so much anymore, right? I'm not sure we would want to do that, or I could advocate for that because we got Colorado River challenges. The Yampa is a tributary of the Colorado River. The main stem of the Colorado River, a lot of pushback, understandably, about any additional diversions through the Continental Divide to the east slope. Work your way down, same theme throughout the western part of our state. We get it. Maybe not as much water there as we thought. The Rio Grande does a remarkable job of protecting their supplies, which have get threatened from time to time from the southern metro area. Arkansas doesn't have a lot of water left. So where are you going to go? The world tells you Colorado River supplies are reducing at best. Where are you going to go? You're going to come to northern Colorado. You're going to come to our backyard. I'm being a little bit parochial right now, but it's our backyard, and we should think about how, or if, not my decision, collectively, should we put some thought into protecting some of those native supplies? They're escaping every day. There's deals being cut, water's being transferred southerly. And some of that's done through filing of unappropriated supplies, but more so it's a little easier just to acquire agriculture, dry it up, extract the water, and you're on your way. Now, agriculture will be hit. At one time in my career, I thought, well, we need to save agriculture. It's my bias. I think that's important to have food and fiber nearby. Putting that aside, I'll say this. Perhaps in northern Colorado, we should think about saving some of these supplies for future generations in northern Colorado. Whatever they want to use it for. The environment, so be it. That's their call, not mine. Farming broccoli versus corn. Who knows? But again, the threat is heightened because we have a key supply in the West Slope that is saying no more for good reason. But that doesn't stop the increase in demand in the East Slope. Just a word on protectionism. How to do that takes money through conservation easements, through other kinds of arrangements to protect those supplies. And the picture on your left, I'll go so far to say, and if there's some amount of unappropriated water within Northern Waters District, we tend to think there is. That's why we've been 18 years in permitting what's called the Northern Integrated Supply Project. I don't want to provide a commercial for that right now, but there's a proposed reservoir near the Poudre River, not on the Poudre, northwest of town here. And we think that reservoir is important to supply water for the future of our region in lieu of drying up agriculture. And I threw this one at the 11th hour. I think our watersheds need some investment. Northern Water, as well as folks who receive water off the Poudre. We had a terrible go in 2020. The Cameron Peak fire, just over 200,000 acres burned. The picture on your left is the footprint of the East Troublesome fire, 197,000 acres. That's our watershed. That's our watershed for the Colorado Big Thompson project. And how does that happen? To some degree, we've had some, certainly at that time, we were dry. But I'm going to link it back to, at some point, I would suggest, can we make an investment in our forests? I'm not suggesting clear cutting, but there's a lot of fuel out there. And is there something we could do as a society to get behind a movement to be thoughtful? Is there places where we can get into the forest, again, in an environmentally sensitive way and try to harvest some of the resource and get it out of there? The fuel just continue to grow. And when that happens and you have a burn like we had for the East Troublesome, it is going to be literally decades, if not a century, before that watershed heals itself. If you've been to Grand County, you've gone through the western entry into the park and around the town Grand Lake area, it's devastating. And there's just in some areas no sign of healing. So that's my thought. I hope that's not a total Debbie Downer, but that's the view I see today for Northern Water. And thank you for your time.
So I have a couple. First of all, how heavily are you guys seeing the impacts of that fire on water quality in the CBT?
Yep, thank you. The question was what's the linkage between water quality that we're seeing thus far and the East Troublesome fire? Thus far, we've ramped up. We've got an extensive water quality monitoring program at Northern Water at the present time. We've ramped that up to stay on top of that. Right now, my observation is it's more from an erosion standpoint, particularly to get more specific, the Willow Creek Basin, which again, that's the kind of the collection basin to the west. We've had a couple rain events this monsoon season, and the erosion just keeps coming. And I was fortunate enough to go up on a helicopter a few weeks ago, and you get into these small watersheds, which might only be 300, 400, 500 acres in size. And the slopes, we've mulched about 7,000 acres of this water, of the watershed, at the tune of 7,000 acres this year, a few acres last year, and totaling there's about 11,000, $27 million for mulching. So it's an expensive endeavor. We think it's important for those areas that are highly susceptible to erosion. It appears to me things are staying intact on the hillside, but when you go into these mountain valleys and you look at that, what was one time a stream of 1 to 5 CFS along the surface, they've stayed almost the same width, and they've just cut straight down 6 or 8 feet, and you know where that sediment ended up, kind of into the bigger streams and ultimately into Willow Creek Reservoir. So we're doing all we can for following the mulching to do some point treatments, some erosion berms to try to hold that sediment from getting into the more important facilities of the CBT project. And of course, you know, with that erosion comes other things, phosphorus, and it's best to keep it all intact if we can.
Thank you. And I was also wondering, how does it work with return flows and such when you bring water from the western slope to the eastern slope that normally wouldn't be in those watersheds? Are the required return flows, like is that process similar to if you were to just be getting water from that watershed? Or
very good question, and let me elaborate. But the question being, I'll try to transcribe a little bit. Let me just say, in terms of return flows, CBT project's a little bit unique as compared to other trans-basin water supplies. In most parts of Colorado, when water comes from another basin and is imported, that watershed never enjoyed that water before. So in most cases, the owner of that water right can use it to extinction because it was never there before. So, hey, you put in the work to get it here, it's all yours. That was pretty well understood. But the CBT project's fairly unique. And in fact, I'll say it is unique in the fact there was, by contract, there was a little bit of a squabble between Eastern Colorado farmers in 1936, leading up to the 1937 creation of Northern Water. And it went like this. Those farmers said, why would I ever support this? That was a time when there was 115,000 people who lived at Northern in our district boundaries. So it's a much fewer people engaged in the dialogue. If we're east of Greeley, and there is some of northern water east of Greeley, about 200 miles, they said, why would I support this? Why would I tax myself and my kids and my grandkids at 1 mil in perpetuity? Because I'm not going to see that water, because you physically can't deliver down the little bitty South Platte in August when I need it. And they struck an arrangement and said, well, okay, we give, you won't get water directly from Horsetooth out to the eastern counties. Physically, you can't get it there. It's just going to dry up and the river's not that strong, but we'll commit to you return flows in perpetuity. So it was a contractual arrangement, not a water rights commitment. And so that's an,
Reestablished the South Platte River.
and so that is in our repayment contract with the federal government, that commitment to, again, protect those return flows for eastern Colorado, typically agriculture. So quite unique to northern water.
Check the Fort Lewis and see if we have.
Any questions from Fort Lewis?
Yes, 1 second.
Flowing river, and then like the stream continues along, it's not being pumped through the hollow. I want to know if that design is now.
So in the Chimney Hollow image, you were showing a stream parallel to the main channel of the river. And we're wondering if that type of arrangement exists in other places as well, or if that's kind of a unique design for this project.
That's a great question. So I put that back, at least on our slide here at CSU. I would imagine somewhere there's been kind of modifications to some kind of a footprint. Windy Gap Reservoir is quite small as compared to most reservoirs. So it's a big deal, but it's not impossible. I say all that thinking surely somewhere. I'm not aware of someone actually downsizing or right sizing or moving a reservoir to do just this, but I wouldn't be surprised if it has happened. But certainly in Colorado and on the Colorado River in Colorado, it's a first, and short of diversion structures, there is no dam across the Colorado River except for the CBT project, about 3 miles, 4 miles upstream of what you're looking at. It's the only dam across the Colorado River in Colorado.
Any other questions?
Great, thank you.
So, this may be a ways off, so I was just curious, because you're mentoring the CBT's unique status and the contracts. Is the CBT at risk, maybe further down the line, if things keep going this way on the Colorado River, of post-compact trans mountain curtailment, which has been theorized?
Very well stated. The question being, is the CBT project, and perhaps we can extend that to the Windy Gap project, is it have exposure to a post 22 compact call? And absolutely. Absolutely. And again, as I mentioned from the get-go, we should not find ourselves there. We should resolve this issue, but that risk onto itself is enough, I would like to think, to motivate Northern Water staff, its board, water users throughout the upper basin, lower basin. We need to figure this out. That's compact call is good for nobody. Yep.
Let's thank our speakers.
Thank you.
If you went to the CSU group here, I haven't been putting readings